Welcome back to Shared Humanity. My name is Nelba Márquez-Greene, and I serve as the activist in residence at the Yale School of Public Health under the umbrella of the Firearm Injury Prevention Initiative. I talk to the humans behind the headlines of gun violence in a moment in history where all too often we focus on everything but our shared humanity. My guest today is Reverend Sharon Risher, who I've known for about a decade. On June 17th, 2015, a horrific tragedy happened. Sharon learned her mom, Ms. Ethel Lee Lance, was killed in Charleston, South Carolina, at the Mother Emanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church, alongside 8 other people, which also included 2 cousins and a childhood friend. Since that time, Sharon has been very outspoken about the nation's gun laws and is one of the spokespersons for the grassroots advocacy group Everytown Survivor Network and Moms Demand Gun Sense in America. Sharon is a leading spokesperson calling for an end to the federal death penalty with deathpenaltyaction.org, even in the case of the white supremacist terrorist who killed her mom, friends, and other relatives.
Out of all of my pain, birthed a new ministry, birthed an activist, and birthed an author. And I thought I was doing pretty good in my life. I was doing my life's work, worked hard to be able to say I was a trauma chaplain in one of the largest county hospitals in Dallas, Texas. And then that tragedy happened on June 17th, 2015, that totally rocked my world.
Can you tell us a little bit, and we don't have to go back to the day.
Yeah.
But many people might see your face but might not know your story.
Okay.
Can you tell us a little bit of whatever you might want to share?
Sure. On June 17, 2015, a young white supremacist who had been radicalized through white supremacist groups on the internet and his own cognitive understanding of what his life was and who were the people he needed to blame, picked, researched Emanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina. And AME is African Methodist Episcopal. He had a plan. The church was full of people. Maybe an hour before he got there, the regular old people who go to Bible study, they were like, no, we're not going to cancel. We're going to stay here. We're going to have our Bible study. My mother was the janitor, Saxton of the church. She did that because she loved being in the church. And then she made, as she would call it, a little extra change as she had retired from the city of Charleston after 38 years. And so I knew she was going to be there. But they did Mark 4, the parable of the sower. He sat there, he listened. And in the time of prayer, when everybody was standing and holding up, he killed them.
And when you say he killed them, among those lost, which was your mom's church community, you also had other loved ones
Yes,
there.
I had my cousin Susie Jackson. She was 87 years old and lived around the corner from the church. And she walked to church any chance she got. And then there was Tawanza Sanders, who was a distant cousin too, all mixed with cousin Susie. And he was 26.
What would you most want us to know about your loved ones?
That they were God-fearing people. And there was no wrong place at the wrong time. It was where they were supposed to be. And their stories will live on forever because of me.
That is powerful. That is powerful. All too often you hear in many people, they say something like, this happened because we've taken God out of schools. But this incident happened in a church while people were praying. What would you say to those who say things like that?
Well, they're misguided because no matter what's going to happen, taking prayer out of school did not affect Dylan Roof. Prayer in and out of school, people, government and political groups or whatever can't dictate human nature. People are going to pray if they don't pray out loud or whatever. So it's not about taking the prayers being taken out of the school. It's about a person's heart and the evil that's in them to cause them to do what they do.
You have committed to so many different kinds of initiatives since this day. Can you tell us a little bit about your work and how your life has kind of gone on since that day?
Racism has always been a top priority in America, and it continues to be because that was definitely a hate crime as a result of racism. I had to learn about me and my faith and what I felt God said about forgiveness, and how I had to realize that forgiveness just wasn't about Dylan Roof. I knew about it because I worked at the hospital, but I was in a cocoon. I really didn't pay attention to how prevalent it was. And after I joined Moms Demand Action and realized how it was, and realized that the story of these 9 Black people in that church was very powerful as a survivor story. And that's what these groups, as far as Moms Demand in every town, survived of survivors telling their stories. So it was a lot of, media and all of that, and my face getting out there. But it's been a lot of work. What's in front of you today was not the same person I was in 2015. I've had to do this to be able to make the rest of my life the best of my life.
I love that. I love that quote. In a country that struggles to admit, not all of us,
Mm-hmm.
but some of us know, we're born knowing that racism is an issue.
Mm-hmm.
But right now we're living in a time where there are people, including lawmakers, who refuse to admit that structural racism is a thing, that refuse to admit that extreme rhetoric is a thing that contributes. I actually sat on a panel 2 years ago, which you know about because I called you so frustrated after, with a group of mental health experts who refused to tie the shooting that ended the lives of those people you love, and we all love by extension, to white nationalism. There's such a difficulty admitting that we struggle as a nation with white nationalism. And there's no way in this case that it could be denied. And yet we still struggle. What would you say to people who still say, but we're all one race, the human race, or white nationalism is not an issue?
America was built because it believed to enslave people would be the best economy for them to be in power and always be in power. Well, how many years, 400 plus years later, the mentality is still the same. They're not going to admit that I enjoy the power that I had from being able to enslave people. I enjoy the power my whiteness gives me to have the best jobs and to be able to rule people and what I say go. To have the audacity to believe that your God is different from the same one I believe in. And America is never going to admit. So now racism, and as far as anybody that feels that, all we can do is keep doing what we do. Keep getting out in front of our legislators and the people we vote and really understand what this is about. because we're not going to ever erase it. And if you sit there and think that that's going to happen, then I feel in my brains you're kind of naive.
And more harm will come. If we don't admit
Yes.
we have an issue currently with the radicalization of our young people,
Yes.
especially around issues like this, and easy access to weapons,
Yes,
we're
very
going to
much.
continue to see these types of tragedies.
And it's
maybe
not
that's
all on mental health. See, and they push that. You know, it's mental. No, some people are evil. Some people just are whatever. Some people never had the opportunity to be secure and safe. And the only way that they can protect themselves is to have this piece of iron that says, I have a little bit of power over my life. For it being right or wrong, I have it and I will use it. Because then my life, as I've been living it, it doesn't feel worthy to anybody.
That's a really good point. You speak to worthiness. And there might be we talk about radicalization often as it pertains to other people, but we don't talk about radicalization when it comes to, moms and dads right now I think about Dylan Roof's parents, and I wonder often, I think about the same with Adam Lanza. I think about what else they could have done and earlier to prevent this kind of outcome or interrupt this kind of outcome. And it's a question we all have to ask ourselves. I have a son.
White privilege. You hear what I'm saying? Not to acknowledge things that need to be fixed because your white privilege will get you by. Yet Dylan Roof found his grandfather reached out to each and every one of us. The reason I started to forgive Dylan Roof is because God had me feeling sorry for him and his family. Like, Lord, they never going to be able to live this down the rest of their lives. The whole Lutheran church, no matter where I go, there is a Lutheran that will come to me and say, I am so sorry for what our brother did.
Your capacity, the depth of your heart for being able to hold the truth, the ugly, bitter truth of the tragedy and forgiveness is profound. And a lot of people are not going to understand it. They're not. You and I have talked about it. We actually sat on a panel and they went around to each of us and said, do you forgive? And you said yes. And I said, I'm not there yet. And speaking of that, you wrote a book about forgiveness and it's called For Such a Time as This.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what it means to you and why you wrote this book?
All right. Here is my book. I wrote this book because it was so much that had happened and so much in my life that there were threads of connecting things you never would have thought about. Things that, how my faith in redemption and being able to pull yourself out of situations you never thought that you would have the gumption and the courage to tell people how you have struggled and how you have struggled. And then Charleston. I wanted people to really kind of see that no matter what you go through in life, no matter where you come from, whatever you've done before, there is a point if you accept and if you're able to do the work, you could that could lead you to be the best person you could be. And I wanted to share that story. And there's a lot of things in that book that's very personal. Can
you hold it up again so we can see it?
Okay.
Can you hold it up again so that if anyone who's watching, they want to purchase a copy of For Such a Time as This, this is Reverend Sharon's heart in words and available to us as she shares her story on her many aspects of this journey, but specifically her forgiveness journey. Um, what is grief like this many years, almost 9 years later?
To have had my mother in my life for 70 years, I had 70 years of almost what? You start to remember things. I can remember, I think, from being 5 years old. So I have 65 years of memories that will never go away. I have 65 years of smelling her and knowing her. And so I've learned to kind of say, oh, it's one of those days.
Mhm.
And if I've got something going on, then I have to make up in my mind whether I'm going to cancel this, because I understand you have to roll when that happens. How you deal with that is on you. Sometimes you can get through and then you just want to get home and feel what you feel, crawl up in the bed, cry, whatever. And some days you just push through and you say, okay, I got to do this though. So some days you can push through and some days you can't. And so it's for you to figure out which day that is, because you're always going to grieve. You're always going to grieve. Let me just say this. There was a bunch of people that had a project, and they wanted to see if I had a voicemail of my mother so they could do AI and recreate her voice and all of this. And I was like, I don't have a voicemail from my mother.
Mm.
But what they wanted to do was real creepy to me. So I will not hear her voice through an AI, but I wish I could hear her voice.
I had to stop for a second and get the tissue for this because the truth is there are so many ways for people to deal with grief, and we're not here to judge one way or another. There
Right.
might be someone for whom that AI works, and I've even seen models where you try to input stuff about your loved one and they try to recreate as if they were still here in their real age. I
Mhm.
am with you in that doesn't work for me, and there's some things I just won't get. At the
Right.
time of the recording, you don't have a voicemail. At the time of this recording, prom is Friday. And I won't get to see Anna in a dress. I won't get to have
Yeah.
that memory.
Mhm.
And people think that grief is linear.
Mhm.
People think that healing from grief, I, I, I always say, Reverend Sharon, that we have a special seat. We sit at the intersection of grief and injustice.
Mhm.
That is quite different
Yeah.
than losing. It would have been really hard had you lost your mom at 70 or 75 or 80 just by older age or something.
Mhm.
That would have been, it might have been predictable because our parents are supposed to
Yeah.
predecease us, right?
Right.
But that still would have been hard. This
Yeah.
this seat of grief and injustice where her life was stolen
Mhm.
due to an act of violence, that is different.
Mhm.
And the recovery or the life after that it's not linear. It's not like, oh, it's been X amount of years, so you are better. You will miss her this Mother's Day, just like you missed her the first Mother's Day. You miss her at Christmas time. You miss her on a random Wednesday.
Mhm. And I believe healing never stops because the wound was so deep. Only an infinite God can even get to where your heart could feel some comfort. But there is never, ever healing until the day you die. That's how I feel that. There is
I
no no, there just, you will never heal from this. You will live out your faith, but there is a place that will never heal. Won't ever get a scab. It's going to stay raw. It's going to be there.
and what would you say? I'm just trying to get through the myths of recovery with survivors, right? There are people who say, oh, it's been 12 years. Or, didn't you join a lawsuit? Aren't you okay? Or, didn't you, weren't you able to do this? It's almost as if people don't know or understand that the implications and the consequence of lax gun laws and the continuation of gun violence that happens and takes 120 lives in the United States every day means that we're here trying to live with that every day for the rest of our own lives.
But I can count on my hand states that have actually passed a hate law bill. South Carolina, where this happened, have not yet. What more do they need to have to see that they need to have a hate crime bill? The Charleston loophole bill that have been put out there to extend the amount of days the background check could be confirmed before a gun is sold. With Dylan Roof, it was 3 days. He should have never been able to buy the gun, but because of the background check being botched, he was able. And, I never really talk about this, but I'm going to say this. Yes, we sued the federal government. We sure did. We sued the federal government because of the neglect in the system that was supposed to protect. The federal government did not want to pay us a dime. But our little group, we kept going, appeal after appeal after appeal, till finally they gave us a little reparations. And that reparations they gave us has made families be able to take care of their families if they do it right for the rest of their lives, like I have done. I will be a good steward of that money, and we accept that little bit of reparations for what those people in that church went through, and you had to admit that you were wrong.
And yet it will never make you whole, but it can do exactly what you said. It can provide some stability for families or individuals and put some stability around generations to come.
Right.
I'm so grateful you have that.
Because our situations was so public. Mm-hmm. Our lives will always be a part of that story, a part of that legacy. And it's for us to continue to stand strong no matter which lane we put ourselves in. Who knew that I would end up being the chairman of the board to abolish the death penalty? Now, what kind of crazy shit is that? Dylan Roof is in Terre Haute, Indiana, waiting to be executed. And I'm with the largest grassroots group to abolish the death penalty that have sent more letters to Biden than the man in the moon to take it. There's a federal moratorium, but we want to abolish, even for the man that did all of that.
I think one of the reasons I wanted to interview you is because I knew that of the many survivors I'm in communion with and I'm getting to know more and more every day, you have that very unique stance. You have a very strong view anti-death penalty. You have a very strong view on forgiveness. And what I want people listening to understand is that every survivor is different. Mm-hmm. Every survivor picks a different cause. Every survivor, there is no universal voice or universal stance. Mm-mm. Every survivor. And what I'm trying to do with this podcast is enlighten people, invite people in to say, wow, everyone is so different. And to that end, there are ways that people can support survivors after an event like this. And that usually gets divided into two places. One is supporting survivors by getting involved in things nationally or locally. And the other is helping the survivor, him or herself, or that family. In what ways, so I'll ask you both questions. If somebody listening is saying, you know what, I'm inspired by Reverend Sharon and I want to be involved. How do I get involved? What would you say to them?
Wow. there are Moms Demand Action local groups in every community. But sometimes it's not about being attached to a group. It could just be speaking up in your local church or your local women's group, and watching the news, understanding how important your vote is. But if you just have to be involved in the rah-rah, you could text 64433, and that'll take you to Moms Demand, and they will connect you with someone. Every time survivor group is made up of just survivors who have been a support to each other through the years. In this group, you could become a fellow and really learn how to do interviews and these type things if that's where your activism takes you. But the biggest thing is to vote.
In any election. I find it so egregious that it is really hard. And that as a survivor and as a griever, we kind of have to temper our tongue sometimes. If we went off.
When people say that, I'm like you, when they say they don't vote, what? You don't vote?
Is that you can't say you feel bad for me. You can't say you feel bad for me if you don't vote. You can't say you remember. I don't even want to hear that you remember my daughter if you don't vote, because to remember my daughter, you must vote.
Yeah.
And that means every election coming up. So I told you earlier, I work at the Yale School of Public Health under Dean Rennie. And it's interesting because folks in public health look at everything through an ecological model. They look at the individual, they look at the neighborhood, they look at the, larger systems all the way till we get to national. And one of the things that keeps coming up that you just said is that this issue of gun violence, you can look at through many different lenses. You can get involved at the national level through joining an activism group. You can get involved locally. Change can also happen by impacting your circle or sphere of influence, whether that's your church, your synagogue, your mosque, your book club, right? Keep bringing up gun violence and survivorship as an issue. There are so many ways. But that center circle, that at the core is the individual and the family, the families that have been most impacted. So if someone were to say to you, and you don't have to answer this, but I thought I'd ask.
Okay.
Reverend Sharon, how might I best help you?
You have helped. I think we have a connection that's definitely spiritual. And see, you don't have to always be up and down in somebody's face, calling all the time, texting all the time. But when there is a spiritual connection, I know that if I have things that I feel like I can't talk to anybody else about, I can pick up the phone and call you. And I don't have to say, well, look, I don't need you. I don't say nothing about this. Nope. I'm not going to go there, because if I'm calling you,
I already know.
And I want you to know the same thing with me. If you're calling me, our conversation is between us, and that's how it go, and I will process it the way I need. But that's how you have helped me. But with other people, when it has to be a community, neighborhood thing when it comes to survivors. You have to be supportive from your community of people. And when you're faced with a death, especially of a child, we know the Black community lack resources even for funeral expenses. Then you have to go into GoFundMe's, and, people need groceries, or some, the mother's so devastated, she's got to lose her job and all of these things. So to be able to make sure that resources are not just thrown out at one time, that somebody's always there for however long it takes to make sure that this person is getting what they need, and they know how to go and get what they need, because the red tape that you have to go through. South Carolina was really good about, victims assistance, but I lived in North Carolina. So it wasn't easy for me. I didn't get anything from the state, not really, when it came to resources. I just didn't feel like filling out all that damn paperwork.
you bring up a really, really good point, and we need to really kind of talk about that there are two things. Number one, there isn't enough help in many communities for families to get the practical assistance that they need. And secondly, sometimes the systems of support that are available for families are so cumbersome, so difficult to navigate that families will say, I'm not filling out that form. I remember filling out so many forms that were invasive, intrusive, asking for so much information that I did the same as you. I said, forget it. It's not worth it. So for anybody listening, I hope you heard Reverend Sharon say that it's about showing up. The more you are in communion or connection with someone before tragedy strikes, right? The more you know how to help after. That's really, really important. Read about the families, know the families if you know there's an area of need. Another thing I tell people is everybody's not going to be an inside the house friend, right? Everyone's not going to open the door and say, please come in, I need this support. But you can always leave something on the porch. I have people leave things on the porch all the time. They know I'm not going to open the door, but they will leave a note saying, hey, we know Mother's Day is coming up, or we know it was Anna's birthday. And I will tell you something. I tell people, prepare for the year there are no flowers. Because like you said earlier, people move on. Grief outlasts empathy. Right? We grieve forever, but the empathy isn't there forever. So I tell survivors, I need you to prepare for the year there are no flowers, the year that everybody moves on. And after that 5-year anniversary, after that 10-year anniversary, people don't remember again until the 20th, until the 30th, those hallmark. So I thought, because this was our 12th Christmas, Reverend Sharon, I thought this was going to be our year. This was going to be the year with no flowers. And I'm getting myself ready. My back is up. I'm in a very, very funky mood, and I don't like this. And I miss my daughter and I'm feeling so upset. And my doorbell rings and I go outside and there's a very humble arrangement. It's not even in a vase. It's in cellophane, and there's this very humble arrangement with no card. No card. And I say, okay, God, thank you. This is not the year, but I wonder who sent this. And I had no idea. And a few weeks later, my son says, Mom, did you get flowers on this day? And I said, yes. Do you know who sent them? And he said, yes, my girlfriend. So to anyone listening, just know that while it does seem at times that people have forgotten, I do believe that the more we go out there, the more we share, the more we tell our story, the more people understand the need to show up. And you are the kind of person that shows up for others. And I just hope so much from the bottom of my heart that people are showing up for you as well. Thank you for listening. Shared Humanity is produced by the Yale School of Public Health. Follow us on social media at Yale SPH and learn more at sph.yale.edu/shared humanity. Thank you to the Yale Porvu Center and Yale Broadcast Studio for their support. We hope this episode empowered you to take action toward positive change and hope.